File handling in Python is very useful if you want to automate some of the most redundant tasks. So in today's video, we're going to be learning how to open files, read files, write them, and close them in Python. Just remember that if you're using Google Colab, like I am here, that these files are temporarily stored and they will be deleted when the runtime disconnects. And you can upload files from here using the Files button and the Upload button. This should open up your file editor and you can upload your own text files. And any file that you write is going to be stored in the same folder, so make sure you download a copy after working with it before disconnecting the runtime. So in this tutorial, we will be working with Python's inbuilt functions that deal with the .txt files only. And if you want to work with other types of files or packages, you can use like pandas, JSON, pickle, and if that's something of your interest and you want to learn more about that, just let me know in the comments below and I will have another video on that in a few weeks. To get started, let's look at two inbuilt functions in Python. One is the open function, which is basically used to open the files, as the name reads, and the other is the close function, and you guessed it right, it's just used to close the files. But it's important to know that once you open a file, you have to close the file in Python. If not, any changes you make will not be saved or stored in the file. So to start off, I'm going to call a variable called text equals open. So this is the function that basically takes in a name. So if there's no file in your folder directory there on the left in Google Colab, you may want to open a file in the write mode. So W is going to be for writing, R is going to be for reading, and there are other modes here that you can look at, like for example, A is for appending. So you can read more about these. There's like binary mode, text mode, and then also like something like disk file for updating. So you can check out all these different modes later depending on how you're going to be using files in Python. For our tutorial here, as a simple one, we're just going to be reading and writing and maybe appending later on. So first I'm going to give it a file name. I'm going to call it my_file.txt, comma. First we have to write the file because this file doesn't exist. So W is the tag that we're going to use, or the argument. And so text will basically open a file, and I'm going to have to close the file. So every time you open a file in Python, you have to close the file. So I use the close in the parentheses to do this. So this should actually be text.close. So let's see what this does. I'm just gonna run this cell right now. And you can see here a file is written, my_.txt. And if I click on it, it opens an empty file because we really have not written anything in it. So let's close all that and let's look at how we can write something in this text file. So I'm going to do open, probably going to create another file here just so that you know that it's going to be a different file. So I'm going to call it my_second_file.txt. Just remember that you need to provide the extension here as .txt because you can also have multiple other files. I'm going to call it R here. This is the read mode. Now just remember this file does not exist, so most likely this is going to throw an error, but also remember by default the mode is in read. So there we go. It shows that there's an error, no such file or directory. So we basically have to change it from read mode to write mode. So we have to first write the file. This is okay. Close is a method. It's not like it's not just a function that you can use off the bat without pointing to any variable. So this will create a text wrapper. So this would mean that you have to close on the text wrapper. So it's always best to store it. There we go. We have our file there, just so you know, and that's also an empty file. Let's close this and let's create or open these files with a variable. Then we can use the close command. To do this, I'm going to say text_1 equals, I'm going to use the open function and let's just open the first file that we created, my_file.txt. This should open the file, and when you run this, it will create that text_1 text wrapper object. Now, let's just remember that this is in the read mode. So if we are to write something, we have to open it in the write mode. Quickly, to write something, we use the .write method. So let's see how we can do that. But first, we need to change this from read mode to write mode. To do that, I'm gonna copy this line here and open this file in the write mode instead of the read mode. And I'll do that by saying "W" with the single quotes. It can also be double quotes. So let's just run this and see. There we go. Now we have that text wrapper called as text_1. So if we open the file, as you can see, there's nothing there yet because we've not written anything. Now let's go and write something. So I'm going to say text_1.write, and I'm going to open the quotes, and this is where I write. This is the first line. So this should basically be in that file. So 22 is the number of characters, so you can count them, and it will be 22 characters. And you can see that if you close that and reopen, there's still nothing. And this is because, remember early on, I said that when you open a file, you have to close it to make sure whatever the changes you made is stored. So in this case, it's not stored. So let's go ahead and close the file. Let's just close the file by saying text_1.close and the parentheses. So this should close the file. And if I open this here, you can see that this line is the first line. So that line is basically printed and saved in that file. So that's how the .close works, and that's why it's necessary. Now let's just go ahead and put all of these things together because I want to show you something else. So the first is the write mode, like opening the file in the write mode. The second is writing the file, or basically writing some text in the file, and then closing the file. So I'm just going to change the text here. So you need the .close, remember, to basically close the file and store the information that you've written. So I'm going to change this line here, this is the second line, and also just to let you know and make things more interesting, I'm going to use the /n. This symbol is basically used to start typing or writing in a new line. So let's run this. And now if you open the file, there you go. You see the first line is empty and the second line is the line that we printed. Now remember, this basically overwrites whatever changes we had made before. So keep that in mind. So every time you open a file in the write mode, it's going to overwrite information. So if you don't want to overwrite the information, you have to use the append method, or open the file in the append method. And when you do that, you can add things to the file. So that is something very important that sometimes you don't realize. You have a file and you open it and you start to write things, and then you realize, oh, what a big mistake that was, because now your file is completely overwritten. So here I'm going to change W to A, and I'm going to say this is the third line. So this should basically, when I run it, you can see that it says this is the second line, and then it says this is the third line. So that's how it works. So append mode is very useful if you want to continue adding something to your file. But if you want to completely overwrite your file, open it in the write mode. Now I'm going to copy this entire code chunk, and let's change it from append mode to write mode. Let's just clean up this file so that we have a text file that says this is the first line, this is the second line, and so on. Right now, if you run this code chunk, it will say this is the first line. So it basically overwrites our previous file because we're in the write mode. So in the same code chunk here, we can add the remaining lines. We can say text_1.write, again, using the same function. And we can just say this is the second line, and then so on. We can keep doing this for as many lines as we want. But just remember, if you want them in separate lines, you have to use the /n here. So I'm going to use this for pretty much every line that I write, and you can just use it once towards the end of your line. So now I'm going to say this is the third line, and so on. I'm also going to use the /n here, and I'll tell you why. See, when you run this file, you can see 4 lines actually, but only 3 of them have text in them, because that /n does that. It adds another line. So let's append the 4th line here. So I'm going to say text_1 equals open. The same file, it's basically the same code chunk, but this time I'm going to use the append method. So this is the key difference here. So I'm trying to show you the difference between the write method and the append method, and also kind of organizing our file here. So I'm going to say text_1 dot write and use the quotations to say this is the 4th line. Don't forget the /n. Now I'm going to say text_1 dot close, because we have to close the file to save any changes we make. So again, opening this file, you can see there are 5 lines, and 4 of those lines have some text in it. And that /n is what's causing the 5th line to appear in our text file. Sometimes we may forget to close the file. In this case, we're going to use the with statement. So if you start with and open, and within the open function, provide the name of the file. So here I'm going to open the my_file.txt, which is the same file we've been dealing with. And I'm going to open in the append mode. And if I say say text_1 and colon, and this is a way to make sure that your file closes automatically after you do a bunch of operations in them. So here I'm going to be opening this in the append mode. So the moment you press enter, here it doesn't work, but the next line is indented. So that means there's some space there. So you don't start off completely from the left. So there's about a tab space or 4 lines of space. On Google Colab, it's just 2 characters. So when I say text1.write, let's say rewrite this line, the 5th line, and execute this, this will automatically close your file for you. So you don't have to use .close. So let's just run this and open our file, and you will see that there is a 5th line. So I didn't use the /n, that's why there's no next line there, but you can see that you can use the with statement to open files without having to use the .close. So this kind of helps you avoid mistakes when you don't close the file. Now let's see how we can read lines from a file. So I'm going to use with open and provide the text file name, which is my_file.txt, and I'm going to use the read method. By default, you don't have to provide anything because automatically it's a read method, but here I'm going to provide R as F. F would be the object that stores the information from our file. So here you go. You see there's an indent when you press enter after the colon. So I'm going to say f.readline. Now this is a function, readline, that reads 1 line at a time. So every time you execute this, it's going to read the next line. So it's going to start from the first line and then go to the next line and so on. So I'm going to store this in a variable called line, and let's just print this line and see what this looks like. So there we go. It says this is the first line. Now, if I want to read multiple lines at once, I can have multiple variables. Like I'm going to call line_1, line_2, and this will be same as f.readline. So this will basically read 2 lines. So if you use a print statement to print these 2 variables, you can see that there are 2 lines that are printed out. So this will be the first 2 lines. There we go. This is the first line. This is the second line. Now let's say you have a file that has hundreds of lines. Practically, you can't be writing hundreds of lines and creating hundreds of variables. It doesn't make sense. So there is a workaround for this, and this is called as the read lines method. It's just the plural form of read line. So that function, I'm just going to copy the code chunk from before, and I'm just going to add s here. So this is read lines. So this one line is sufficient to read all the lines in our file. So you can just print the line underscore one, or change it to line. And now when I run this code, you will see the line function, or sorry, the line variable is basically a list. It's storing a list of all the lines. And you can see that \n is also part of this, part of each line. So if you want to check the data type of this, you can just do type line. I have to use a print statement here, so I'm going to enclose this entire thing in a print statement and rerun this, and you can see that it says class list. So it basically is a list of lines. So I'm going to copy the code chunk as before to show you what line underscore one is. And remember, these are individual lines. So if you check the data type, this is of string data type. Everything you read using readline will be a string. If you use read lines, it will be a list of strings. So now let's look at how you can write variables and lists and dictionaries into a text file. So you basically have a variable here, a equals 10, and I'm going to use the same method as before, using the with statement to open the file here. And I'm opening the second file that we created in the write mode. And all you have to do is basically use the write function to write the variable, in this case, which is a equals 10.00. So I'm going to use f.write, and in here I'm going to place a, so this will basically write the variable into our file. Note that this is of the float data type. So let's also look at how the data type changes here and why certain data types are necessary. So here I'm also going to do something else here. I'm going to copy paste this because I also want to check what the data type is when we are in the read mode. So, and I know that from our previous discussion here a while back, this should all be string. I'm going to assign this line to a variable called a. That way we can print this variable and check its data type as well. So I'm going to check the data type of a. Note that a will be overwritten now because initially it was float and now it will be of string. So I'm just going to say print type of a here. That way we are printing the data type first, and later on when it's overwritten, we can check the data type again. So the first with statement will write the file. The second with statement will read the file. So let's see how the data type changes here. So all I have to do is just run this code. Looks like there's an error. Write argument must be string, so not float. So that's basically this particular line here. So a, when it's written, should technically be a string. So this is one, you can say, as a drawback of using the inbuilt functions in Python. So you have to convert everything to string before you write it. So if you have a data type that you want to preserve, you're not going to get that here. So you can see the float data type is basically changed to string in the very fourth line. And then later on, you can see that when it's read, it still remains as a string. So that 10.0 is actually a string. So if you want to check out dictionaries, again, dictionaries as well, you have to convert them to strings. So here I have a dictionary with name and age as the keys, and the values are basically my name. I'm not 40, but let's just put 40 there. And then I'm going to have another list. Let's say a list equals something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now what we're going to do is basically copy what we've done before, copy paste it. That way we can see how we can store dictionaries and lists in a text file. Now you can already see that this might be of some use for it could be any kind of operation that your code does. It would be nice to, open a file, do some operations, and store information. So here I'm going to write both the dictionary and a list. Note that I'm converting them into a string before, and I'm going to copy the second block here, and this is basically reading the file. So here I'm going to say, instead of a, actually let's keep that. Let's just change this line here, or actually let's change this too. So if I do read line, it only reads one line. So if we want, we can basically enclose this in a print statement, and that way we'll know what the line is basically. So you can see it's the dictionary followed by the list, and this is one single line. So this is not separate lines. If you want separate lines, all you have to do is use the plus symbol. This is something that we've covered in strings, so that's in the very first video in the series. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead and watch that video. You will know why we do this. So now you can see the print statement only returns the first line. The list is actually stored in the second line. So you can see by opening the file there. Now there are other Python packages that are far more effective in reading and writing files. We'll talk about that in another video perhaps. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed watching this, do consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button. It really helps out the algorithm and for this channel to grow. And until our next video, please take care and have an amazing day.